Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pearce. I guess this is another breaking news update concerning the Tomahawk missile, the cruise missile that the US may or may not be giving to Ukraine. It's actually looking more likely even after my report last night. I talked about this interaction, and I'm just going to play you the very short excerpt that's the most meaningful part of Donald Trump's statements on the matter.
I sort of made a decision, pretty much, if you consider. I think I want to find out what they're doing with them.
Yes.
Where are they sending them? I guess I'd have to ask that question.
Which I did my interpretation last night, my analysis of this, and I said broadly that is a yes, but rather than a no, because you wouldn't, if you said no, you wouldn't be like, and then I'm going to ask some questions. It's just like no. So this is more like a yeah, but I've got some questions to ask. Okay, so I did all that analysis. It's looking more probable than not that Ukraine will receive Tomahawks, though they'll probably be sold to NATO allies that rather than be given by the US. That's almost certainly the case. Now, this morning, some of you in the threads are like, no, don't believe it. Trump is being Trump, etc., and that's justifiable, absolutely. But today, there's more data to add. So this is MP Chernev, a Ukrainian MP, saying Ukraine will first be given several Tomahawk missiles, but they will not be allowed to hit Russia with them straight away because it is important to find out Putin's reaction. Quote, if there's no reaction, strikes on the Russian border are possible. If Putin does not go to negotiations, the radius of destruction will be increased, as will the supply of missiles to Ukraine. Now, assuming that is a correct statement from Chernev, and that's what he said, and assuming that this is actually the case, this makes me really angry. It makes me really angry that you would communicate to Putin exactly what the situation is, because now Putin just sees that and goes, okay, so if there is no reaction, strikes on the Russian border are possible. Well, then I'll give a reaction. I'll threaten nukes. I'll do this. I'll do this. I'll do that. Why are you telegraphing exactly what situation needs to occur for Tomahawks not to go to Ukraine? It's just insane. It's just absolutely ridiculous, in my humble opinion. So, but the long and the short of it is, it looks like Ukraine are going to get at least some Tomahawks, right? Let's go and look at the Tomahawks in a tiny bit more detail. Here's a comparison between the Tomahawk and the Flamingo. So the Flamingo is a 20-foot missile, while the Tomahawk is a 9-foot missile. Really big difference in size there, and the range is considerably greater for the Tomahawk than actually, I don't know if that's the Flamingo, isn't it? Compared to an ATACMS. So obviously we know the Flamingo can go a lot further. Now the Tomahawk says 1,500 miles there. So what's that? We'll see what that is in kilometers in a short while. Okay. There's actually now been a thread from the Institute for the Study of War, so they're taking this very seriously. The Kremlin is trying to prevent the United States from providing Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine in order to retain the sanctuary that Russia enjoys in its rear. However, I don't think they've tried particularly hard so far. I was saying just the other day that Putin's saying if the US hands over Tomahawks to Ukraine, it will lead to the destruction of relations between the US and Russia. That was Putin's deterrence. Now, I think that would have worked on Trump a month ago, but Trump has had this kind of road to Damascus moment that I think has been quite meaningful of late, and I don't know that will have as much purchase as, say, rattling the nuke saber again. Now, I think what this MP is saying will allow Putin to saber rattle with nukes, and that will possibly have an effect on Trump. It's just really frustrating. This is all being done out in the open. So we have some details on the Tomahawk. So if you can see this infographic here, at least 1,945 known Russian military objects, including 76 air bases, are in range of Tomahawks, given the 2,500-kilometer variant. At least 1,655 known Russian military objects, including 67 air bases, are within the range of the 1,600-kilometer variant. So it depends which Tomahawk the Ukrainians would receive. And there's a whole question about how they launch them. They're generally launched by ships or submarines, but there are systems. We'll talk about that in a second. The ISW says Ukrainian forces are able to conduct long-range drone strikes against a significant portion of Russia's rear, but the payloads on these drones are limited and not suitable to destroy specialized objects. So the drones are less likely to be able to break through, so do any kind of bunker busting or get through, more difficult protected buildings and whatnot. Whereas I think the Tomahawk would do a better job. Now, Ukraine's ability to launch missile strikes deep into Russia's rear with larger payloads would allow Ukraine to significantly damage, if not destroy, key military assets in Russia, such as the Shahed drone factory in Yelabuga, Republic of Tatarstan, or the Engels 2 airbase in Saratov Oblast. These two, particularly Yelabuga, I've been banging on about this for however long. Goodness me, this is target number one. Why has it not been taken out? Well, because I think it's too big and the drones aren't getting through in the required number, and they don't do enough damage, I don't think, to those buildings, those huge warehouses. Interesting that Engels 2 is mentioned there as well. So, the sending of missiles is often from Engels 2, from the planes that take off from there, and then you've obviously got guided glide bombs too. Russia has been able to significantly scale up its Shahed drone production by expanding the factory in Yelabuga, allowing Russia to launch increasingly large and more frequent long-range drone strikes against Ukraine. Russia's nightly strike packages in September featured an average of 187 long-range drones per night. Similar strike packages in January only featured an average of 83. So the difference between January this year and September this year is an over doubling of the average number of drones used in each strike. That's how bad it is at the moment for Ukraine. Russia notably started launching overnight strike packages that included over 500 drones more frequently in September. ISW assesses that at least 1,945 Russian military objects are within range of the 2,500 kilometer variant, 1,655 of the 1,600 kilometer variant. Ukraine can likely significantly degrade Russia's frontline battlefield performance by targeting a vulnerable set of rear support areas. And Tomahawk really could be very useful. Ukraine has reportedly launched mass production of its new domestically produced FP5 Flamingo cruise missile with a 3,000 kilometer range and 1,150 kilogram warhead, but the system remains unproven and Ukraine will need time to scale up production. Okay, so there is that. We've had Putin's reaction. Now, this is a Russian source, so a Google Translate. I just think it's interesting to bring a couple of the claims here up. So according to the Agency for Defense Security Cooperation, the Netherlands has requested approval to purchase up to 163 Tomahawk Block 5 all-up rounds, AURs, 12 AUR for the Tomahawk Block 4, and 10 Tomahawk Tactical Missile Control Systems, as well as 12 Tomahawk Block 4 telemetry missiles. The transfer of the Netherlands' own missiles is consistent with new rules under which Europe purchases weapons from the US for Ukraine. So it could well be that the Netherlands, for example, is going to be buying. They've had the approval to buy a whole bunch of Tomahawk stuff, and it would fit in line with what's both allowed and what the Netherlands have been doing in terms of getting those to Ukraine. In fact, this person continues, the West's old strategy has worked. They say that if Russia doesn't make concessions, they'll transfer some weapons to Ukraine. But in reality, they're already training specialists and sending these weapons. By the same logic, Tomahawk missiles could already be in Ukraine and ready for use. I would also see that as a fairly, well, it's certainly possible, and I would say it's plausible, maybe going on to probable. The remaining question is when to expect the first use, given that crew training requires at least a year, it said. If the first launches occur earlier, NATO forces will obviously be directly involved in the strikes against Russia. That's the claim there. Okay. Now, another source here says the US President Trump has said he has sort of made a decision to supply Tomahawk cruise missiles to Ukraine, weapons capable of reaching more than 1,600 kilometers and putting deep Russian targets well within reach. At the same time, there's been heavy traffic of military aircraft across the Atlantic, with tankers and transports flying in patterns we only see when major deployments are underway. It is hard not to think that some of those assets are already in position. For a country that often glorifies hardship, Russia may soon be forced to endure more suffering than it ever wished for, and perhaps before the first missiles are launched, we will see Putin suddenly eager to negotiate in good faith, because before the moment comes, just before the moment comes for his arrest. So that's a fairly hopeful look at it. But the claim there is that there's been an unusual amount of traffic going across the Atlantic, and that would align with Ukraine being provided Tomahawks. But of course, there's lots going on with the PURL initiative, where Europe is buying a lot of stuff from the United States. Now, the flip side is, this is what a pro-Russian simp, Douglas McGregor, a former military man from the US who is a disgraced shill for Russia. But he's saying if Ukraine uses US supplied Tomahawk missiles, America could find itself at war with Russia within a matter of hours. That war could rapidly escalate to the nuclear level, and once you hit the nuclear level, you have almost no control. So this is, the nuke saber rattling not coming from Putin, but from one of his shills. Expect to see that quite a bit. Now, people have been asking or complaining really that, hey, they're not going to get Tomahawks, the Ukrainians, because they can't fire them. And there is an element of truth to that, but also the US is developing ground-based systems, has developed them and has deployed them. So they are about, by the way, just to let you know, these are the deets of one of the types of Tomahawks, speed of 885 kilometers an hour, and that's the 1,600 kilometer ranged variant. So often fired from ships and submarines. This is the US Typhon system, which is capable of launching both the Tomahawk and the SM-6 missile as well. So newly developed ground launchers exist for Tomahawks, but the technology is currently only fielded by the US. Ground launch systems for the cruise missile began to be developed after the collapse of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 2019. So basically, US and Russia had agreed not to allow for ground launch systems that went over a certain distance. Ranges between 500 and 5,500 kilometers. Well, now that's sort of gone by the wayside. They are getting on with producing these, and so when you go to the Typhon missile system Wikipedia page, you can see that actually they are making these, and they are even deploying them. So they're deployed in Japan and the Philippines, with the Philippines, I think, looking to buy some, Germany looking to buy some. You would bet your bottom dollar that the US would want to see these be used. They would want to have them tested in a real battle environment. This would be incredibly useful for the US, because these are going to be part of their inventory going forward. Typhon, also commonly referred to as a Strategic Mid-Range Fire System, so the SMRF, is a US Army Transporter Erector Launcher. So the TL, for standard SM-6 and Tomahawk missiles. Each system contains 4 strike length cells from the Mark 41 vertical launching system mounted on the footprint of a 40-foot ISO container. Formerly known as the Mid-Range Capability System, the MCS, it has since been renamed to the SMRF and given the designation Typhon. So it can fire these Tomahawk cruise missiles, and that has actually been deployed. So how many are in existence was a bit difficult to tell exactly. They have been deployed to the Philippines. Second battery was activated in January 2024, designated a D battery. So they've also, and in 2026, the US will begin episodic deployments in Germany of long-range fires. It states that these units will have significantly longer range than current land-based fires in Europe and will include the SM-6 and Tomahawk, indicating that deployment will include the MRC. On September 4th, 2024, the Secretary of the US Army said that the deployment of the multi-domain task force in Japan which includes a Typhon system, has been discussed during her visit. So possible Japan deployment. Philippine military announced they plan on acquiring the Typhon missile system. German defense ministers announced that Germany has submitted a purchase request for the US government for an undisclosed number of systems. That could include Ukraine, right? A purchase decision will be made as soon as this is confirmed. That's in July this year. And then July again, the US Army announced that Typhon had successfully sunk a maritime target on the 15th of July during exercise Talisman Sabre 25 in Australia's Northern Territory, using in that case an SM-6 missile. And yeah, in August this year, US Marine Corps announced it will conduct Typhon operational training without missile launches at Japan's air station, Iwakuni Air Station, and briefed relevant government agencies. So it looks like they're out and about around the world, and that Germany and the Philippines have asked for their own variants, and also Ukraine has asked for this. So yeah, that the potential operators, Philippines, Germany, Ukraine, the definite operators, the United States. So there are these about, they are making them. Is it Lockheed Martin that is making these? Yeah, Lockheed Martin. So you can imagine they will want to make as many as they possibly can. So it all just comes down to, I think, what the US want to do in terms of supporting Ukraine. So I think the obstacle put up by some people, the Typhon launcher, is there are only a few prototypes. I think there are more than prototypes. There appear to be operational batteries of these, and countries have asked for them and may well be getting them already. It could be that these things are being made. It could be that Ukraine receives a single launcher from the US or something like that. Who knows? But I don't think this is as big an obstacle to Ukraine getting Tomahawks, because I don't think they're going to get many Tomahawks, right? I think they'd only get probably a single launcher and a small number of these missiles, and then fire them at particular targets. But it looks like, if we're to believe the MP, it looks like the targets would be, I guess, within sort of Crimea or somewhere like that. Maybe the Kerch Bridge. I don't know. Maybe. Yeah, it says will not be allowed to hit Russia with them right away. So even somewhere like Novorossiysk looks to be out of action there. I mean, it'd be great to see some ships and port infrastructure hitting Novorossiysk, and then Engels Air Base, and of course Yelabuga. But that might have to wait. So that really restricts you to the occupied territories, and including Crimea. We shall see. What the time frame will be, I don't know, but worryingly, this has been very much telegraphed to Putin, and Putin can now react in a way that will probably stop these missiles being used in Russia. So I don't, kind of what's the point? I guess Ukraine, I guess the US even gets to sell a bunch of missiles and then says, oh, and by the way, you can't use them where you want to use them, but thanks for buying them anyway. I don't know. Anyway, let me know what you think. Take care, and I'll speak to you soon.